Well, isn't this weird? Hey, it's Romania Black, and if you can believe it, we are on the season finale of Psychopath Season 3. Huh. The good news is that we have at least a month of Psychopaths left to go after this, which is exciting. The sad news is we have at least a month, maybe not more, of Psychopaths left to go after this, so that's sad. I'm gonna miss this show so much, but we're not there yet, so we're not gonna talk about that. That's a ways away. But we are on the season finale of season 3, and I have really, really enjoyed this season. I don't feel like we're wrapping up this episode, right? I don't feel like we are. I feel like even with season two, you could kind of feel the wrap up like around episode 7, like you could kind of feel, or episode 11 or whatever. The penultimate episode, you felt the wrap up. You're like, okay, yeah, we're going to end things. I don't know how we're going to end things. We're going to end things in the next episode. This one does not feel like we're ending things because I feel like we're just now figuring out and connecting the dots with the whole thing, with the round robin, with Bifrost, with all of that. I feel like we're just now kind of understanding it, and we're just now, we've taken out a whole bunch of characters. The whole side plot is gone. we solved all that. But I feel like that side plot was all there just in service of kind of starting to uncover Azusawa and Bifrost. I feel like Azusawa is nowhere near being conquered. I think we're just going to be getting to know him. And I feel like we're just going to get to know Miyano Mamoru's character, who has been very mysterious. I feel like the whole thing with Alma, with Tori, with Shinogi and O'Brien, that was this season's subplot. Alongside the governor and, Shimajuji or whatever his name was, that was the wrestler. Like, all that was side plot, all centered around the little factions that were umbrellaed under Bifrost. And now we're getting finally to the center of the umbrella, and I feel like it's going to close on us. And then whatever we have after this is going to be expanding on that. Or at least I hope. I don't know. I haven't decided whether I want it to be that if we do carry on and move forward with the media that's coming after this season, there is a part of me that does want it, in fact, to carry on from this season, not wrap up this season, but carry it on to the other things. And then the final movie, I know there's a final movie, and carry it on and end it there. That's fine. But then the other part of me is like, I want some kind of backstory as to what happened with Akane, what happened at the beginning, why is she in isolation, what went down. And if we get that after this season, that's fine. But I don't think this season's going to wrap up. But I don't know. And that's kind of been the fun thing, is that Psychopaths has taken us on this journey, and we kind of just have to trust them. And going into episode 7, I was really questioning that trust. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. And it made it work. So I was like, okay, Psychopaths, I was wrong for doubting you, for doubting the Sybil system. That was my bad. I'm going to put my hands in you now, and we'll just go from there. So yes. So yeah. So, I do have a couple comments before we start. Anime Annie noted in episode 5 that the book that I was really wanting translated, unfortunately, she was like, I can't translate it, but I can tell you it's in Danish. And I was like, why is it Danish? I was like, dang it. So, yeah, so who knows? But then Sunspots had some comments as well. Talking first of all about the Public Safety Bureau. Yeah, we talked about this last episode and in episode 6. Their main mission is essentially just to protect those with healthy hues. Everybody else is kind of like just in the way. And so they either need to be integrated into the system as enforcers or whatever, or they need to be relegated or disposed of, whether that's putting them in the slums and relegating that as part of the system. So it was all planned to begin with. We all knew what we were doing, so it's not anything crazy, or they're disposed of, and that's the last time we see them. So I thought that part was interesting. And then with Kunozuka, we talked a little bit about Kunozuka in the comments. They were suggesting that in parts of the fandom, they had questioned whether her sexuality was the reason why her hue was clouded. And I was like, which I don't think that's the reason at all. I think it's the fact of what she's witnessed. We've established in this series that witnessing something as simple as watching someone be hit with a Dominator, or killing someone, or attacking someone, or drinking alcohol, or smoking, any of those little things that have any type of negative emotional context can trigger your hue and cloud it. And so something like sexuality, it's like, that's a oddly specific, because it's like, love is love. Love should not be something that clouds your hue. Love should be something that sustains it. Now, I told them in the comment that I could kind of see if Kunazuka had been ridiculed because of their sexuality, if they had been ridiculed or persecuted because of it, then yeah, I could see your hue clouding because of that persecution, not the sexuality, but your persecution and the way people act around you. But in this world, that's not the case. Everybody is so super open-minded about sexuality in this world, which is really cool. And that leads to the point that they were bringing up, is that to kind of counter some of the fandom claims, the creator Urobuchi had discussed in season 1 and season 2 and in several profiling art books that the Psycho-Pass world has same-sex marriage as being legal. And that in a Q&A they did, the creator said all families are a result of what the Sybil system has deemed would be optimal, would give optimal happiness for those involved, regardless of the form. And I was like, Sybil system, you got a lot of problems, but progressivism is not one of them. And I was like, yeah, I kind of view this series in a weird way as like the Star Trek of anime. And I was thinking about that after reading this comment, because yeah, in the original Star Trek, I'm not talking about the modern stuff, whatever, that stuff's garbage, but like in Next Generation, Star Trek, basically the William Shatner Star Trek, and then Star Trek Next Generation with Jean-Luc Picard in it, like the 80s version, right? That's what I grew up watching Star Trek. My dad loved Star Trek. I grew up watching that with him. We watched Next Generation. He watched the Shatner one before it, with Spock. But essentially in the Star Trek world, it's all progressive. Like in the future, it's like people from all different walks of life, all different diverse cultures and diverse races and background and species. They're all interacting with one another, and they all work together and are viewed as essentially equal. Now, obviously you have Klingons and you have wars and things like that, but they're not judged by their sexuality or by anything like that. It's the what their character does or what their people do. Their actions are what gets them into conflict, not who they are physically or sexually or biologically. So I feel like Psycho-Pass is like the Star Trek equivalent in anime, because they're so open-minded. It's a very progressive series, but what I love about it is that it brings in all of these diverse cultures and sexualities, but it does so in a way that's not on the nose. It doesn't treat you like you're dumb. It just brings it in, and it's just part of the world. It doesn't have to call it out. It doesn't have to be like, look, Kunazuka's not there being like, I'm gay. Like, she's not doing that. She just is. And that's just her character. And it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And the series doesn't call it to attention. And I feel like if you're part of that community or that culture, then you feel so welcome by this series, because you are part of a normal functioning society, like you should be. So it's like we can all hate the Sybil system together, regardless of our sexuality or culture. So I like that a lot, but I really appreciate like pointing that out, because I hadn't thought of it that way. And I feel like if you question someone's hue being clouded because of their sexuality, then you should probably question everybody in a relationship at this point. If you're going to do that. And I don't think that's what those people are doing. So it's Pride Month. So a good time to bring that up. But yeah, I'm super excited for the season finale. I don't know what all we're going to get. It seems like we will hopefully get answers. What those answers are, I don't know. How many of those answers we get, I don't know. And where the season is going to lead off at, I don't know either. What I do know is that we've spent nearly 10 minutes talking about this. So I am super excited. I hope you all enjoy this reaction and discussion. I can't believe we're on episode 8, but you know what? 8's my lucky number. Hopefully this is a good one. So we're going to get started with Psycho-Pass Season 3, Episode 8. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh my god, this episode. Okay, here's the thing. I did go look up real quick to know what I'm getting into for the next several weeks. So there's 4 more weeks after this of Psycho-Pass. There are three three small films, kind of like Sinner in the System, but they're 45 minutes each. So it's basically like this was the rule of 8. This was the rule of 8. This was the turn into the final act. And then we're going to have, I'm assuming, episodes 1, 2, and 3 of this Inspector arc, which is basically like episodes 9, 10, and 11, right? And then we'll have Providence, which is the film, which is going to be 12. So I'm assuming that the rest of this entire conflict is going to be resolved in at least the 3 to come, because they're all kind of bunched together, right? And then we'll have Providence, which is the final movie. And that's all I know is it's called Providence. I don't know anything else about it. I don't want to know anything else about it. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But the fact that the other 3 films are going to be 45 minutes, I'm like, so basically it's like episodes 9, 10, and 11 of this season. They just probably did them at a different time and released them together. I don't know the speculation. I don't know the production reasons behind it. I don't know. But because this episode was not, it felt like a season finale, but it didn't feel like a final season by any means. I'm just like, I'm so floored by Kay's decision to, I get it. I mean, I get it, but I'm like, for him to basically betray Shindo and become an inspector for them. And that's what it was. Because he basically sold his soul. He made a deal with the devil to save his wife. And, because now the question's going to be like, is Kay going to suffer for it? Because unless they can spin this around where we somehow spin it, where Shindo or somebody finds a way to spin it as Kay managed to infiltrate Bifrost as an inspector without realizing it, and then he's like, well, I'm here, I'm in Bifrost, I'm working my way up, now I'll help you guys get in the system and tear it down from the inside. Unless that's the case, and unless that's the intent, and maybe that is the intent, we'll talk about it, then it's like, I don't see how this will end well for Kay and his wife. I don't see how this will end well with his actions that he just took. And a lot of it was just Kay's anger and his frustration at Shindo and his distrust of Shindo. And Shindo's like, and granted, there is the potential for Shindo to become like his dad. Now that we know a little bit more about the dad's backstory, as he was asymptomatic, and a little bit about this whole thing, I'm fascinated by some of the world building that Psycho-Pass does. So the idea of not only being a mentalist, that we understand not only a mentalist being able to be like a detective in that he can recreate crime scenes, but also kind of also being somewhat of a manipulator, which is more kind of going along the lines of Karina, because Karina's kind of a mentalist herself. And then we have the Macarena, which, hey, Macarena, which is the AI that's able to manipulate. So there's that distrust factor there. But the fact that you add that plus being asymptomatic, it definitely makes it appear as if you're kind of invincible in a way. Where you kind of like his father, we find out, was the same way, and his father was able to manipulate people, and he was never really, as far as we know from the situation, until his death, he was able to get away with it because he was asymptomatic. You couldn't cloud his hue. He was impervious to Sybil's system. And so the idea that his father also not only was like that, but also was, in a sense, training Shindo to be the same. Like, what we get out of this episode is the fact that everybody's afraid of Shindo because his dad was so powerful as a mentalist, and we get kind of confirmation that his dad was kind of training Shindo to do the exact same thing. He just ended up dying. So then we have over here the idea of Kay, who is not only dealing with his wife and her predicament, but there's also the whole thing with immigration going on, and the fact that he's caught up in the middle of it now. It's not just that immigrants are being persecuted. He specifically is, by the government that Shindo and them have been tasked to protect. And so he's all conflicted with, like, I've been charged by Sybil system to protect this system that is actively trying to hurt my wife and I. Okay. And we're going to talk about that with Bifrost and everything. And he's like, this, he's pissed off at it. And he's pissed off because Shindo, I feel like Kay realizes at this point that Shindo kind of has a crush on Karina. I feel like he realizes that. He knows that Shindo has a crush on Karina. So I feel in Kay's mind, he's somewhat thinking that Shindo is not only supporting a system that's actively taking measures against him and his wife, who are supposed to be their good friends, right? He's like, Shindo, we're supposed to be good friends. You're supporting the system that is actively persecuting and opposing my wife and I. But also, he's like, we're supposed to be friends, and you're flirting with this governor, and, where's your priorities? And then he's mad at Shindo because he thinks that Shindo's partially responsible for his wife being institutionalized. And so there's just all of these layers of Kay just having all this pent up frustration and irritation and anger. And then who comes to give him a way out? The congressman, Hotaru. Or Homura. Is it Homura or Hotaru? I thought it was Hotaru. It's basically Miyano Mamoru's character. And Miyano's character enlists him. Basically, he not only knew about his wife, but was like, oh shit, you're here. So he enlists Kay with the promise of getting his wife out. The thing that sucks was that Shindo was like trying to push Karina to do the same thing. Now, Karina wasn't going to do it. We're going to talk about that. But it's the idea that he was trying to, and Kay's like, well, I'll take matters into my own hands. And he ends up joining as the 13th inspector. So there's 12 others, right? Or he's the 13th to enlist. We don't know. Although Obata said she was bumped up to 11th. So it means there's 13 altogether. Okay. So we have this system. We know that Bifrost is up here. Right? Bifrost is up here. And then there are the inspectors. And then there are the foxes. Which the foxes are often civilians that don't exactly know what they're doing. The inspectors are trying to move up. Oh, well, congressmen. Never mind. This is kind of the Bifrost system. Is that there's congressmen. Right? Now, they labeled it as a pyramid, but the whole episode was called CUBISM. So that made me wonder if it was really just like if you had foxes that became inspectors, that became congressmen, that were working for Bifrost, who were hiring foxes, and it just became this cube of things that were going on. I wanted to look up real quick and talk about a couple things. So looking up cubism, a revolutionary approach to representing reality. Yes, how we represent the concept of cubism. Subjects are analyzed, broken up, and reassembled in an abstract form. Instead of depicting objects from a single perspective, they are depicted from multiple perspectives to represent the subject in a greater context. Yep. Interesting indeed. And then I also wanted to look up the story, The Nutcracker, and what was it? The Nutcracker and the Mouse King by our dear sweet Hoffman. We're going to talk about that story here in a little bit. But yeah. Oh my God. So it's just, this whole episode was just absolutely insanity, right? So we find out Kisaragi's story, which is interesting, where Kisaragi was involved in a car accident. The person who caused the accident, their hue was not clouded, but theirs were. They were institutionalized. And then from there, her husband ends up dying and she ends up becoming an enforcer. And she's like, she had this outlet for her anger because she's like, I needed a way to get rid of my anger and to like do something about it. So then she talks about a year ago, she found online counseling, right? This online counseling that she clicked, chat with a counselor. And from there, it was the foxes, and they basically kind of hired her into there. And she like, I wanted something. And then they sent me instructions. So essentially, she kind of got wrangled in as a fox, Kisaragi did. But she's kind of got out of it now, right? Meanwhile, Kay has just upgraded himself to inspector. What's so frustrating about it is, like, I don't feel like Shindo's going to take this news well if he finds out. He's like, what are you doing? Why didn't you tell anybody? And here's the thing, like, Kogami and Ganoza, Like, Ganoza's had some interactions with Kay. They seem like they're on good terms. He seems like Ganoza would try to understand where Kay's coming from. Kogami don't give a shit. Kogami would, like, manhandle Kay if he could. Kogami be like, what the fudge are you doing? Why are you being an idiot? Like, Kogami has no shits for anybody right now, which I anticipate that's going to go down. That Shindo's going to be like, why are you with the inspectors? And why are you with the foxes? And then Kogami's like, well, and here's the thing, too, that's kind of like the kicker in it. Azusawa, as we come to find out, Azusawa was taught and also hated Shindo's dad at sushi. And so he has it out for Shindo because he's like, well, like father, like son sort of thing. And then in that regard, too, you have also Atsushi who supposedly killed Akira, and Kei harbors resentment against Atsushi as well. But he took it out on Shindo this episode, and I was like, Kei, you know that Shindo is not his father. Like, he may have the same ability, but he's not his dad. And I felt that Kei went out of line this episode, and I understand why he did. It was out of anger, and it was out of spite. But I'm like, you did not help your cause at all. But I get why he did it. But I feel like it's really presumptive for Azusawa and Kei to align some of those things. Like, when he questions if Shindo would manipulate him and his wife, and Shindo's like, no, I'm your friend, I wouldn't do that. I was like, that is, I don't know. I feel like Shinogami suggests that Kei is being set up to be a rival to Azusawa, to be the next congressman, because they need a third congressman. It's just, right now, it's just Shizuka and Shinogane. So Shizuka, who is Miyano Mamoru's character, Shinogane is presenting it as Azusawa's his representative, his candidate, and Kei is Shizuka's representative, which I'm like, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, the thing that's so scary about all of this is that I do think that Kei would legit go up and become a congressman because he thinks he could take down Bifrost from within. He thinks he could take down the system from within, and Kei would take on the responsibility, being like, well, it's my fault I chose this. I chose to activate that control thing. I chose to become an inspector. I chose to get this far. It's my responsibility. I can handle it. I can do it. But what we've seen from the season is that no, he gets very emotional and he needs help, and he just doesn't want to accept that. So I'm so worried for Kei now. I was like, shit, no. And then Kunozuka, is she dead? Did they just kill her at the end of this season? What the fudge? I hope she's alive next episode. Now I want to watch next episode so we can find out if she's alive or not. But I'm going on vacation and I'm not going to be able to know for a week. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. No, it's not. Oh my God. It's not fine. Nope. It is absolutely not fine. So yeah. So basically what she ended up having, they sent me instructions that was like to file an investigation report with the maintenance team, with their maintenance team. And basically while she was an enforcer, he was like, file her questions like it was a false report. And then immediately after, the two inspectors ended up being dead. So she gave information that allowed them to be killed. And she's like, I was a cog in the machine. I helped enable that to happen and became part of the system. And she's like, I want to try to get out of it. The thing that's so insane is that Sad and Frederica was like, you've got a fox in your midst. And they were like, oh, it's Kisaragi, but she's fine. And by the end of this episode, no, Kei is the fox. Kei is the inspector. He's the one in their midst that we should be worried about. And it's like, I feel personally betrayed by Kei's decision. And I was like, because this episode, like the tension between them, between Shindo and Kei, you could cut it with a knife. You could just take a machete and like dig through that tension. Like you would have to hack through it with a hacksaw. It was so tense. And the body language, like when they're forced to be in the interview together, they're both like this, and they're both like their body language, they're turned against each other. And then when they're individually interviewed, they're in different locations. Mai seems to be on a good level still with Shindo, but I don't know. The whole thing with Mai getting released, I feel as if there's going to be like a monkey's paw, like something bad's going to happen because of it. I mean, obviously, Kay sold himself out to be a double agent and is now like, okay, what you gonna do? Because now he's getting instructions like Kisaragi, and she was the only one who originally told him all of that, so... And I think Kogami knows that it's him, because Kogami is our Sherlock Holmes. He knows. Kogami was very under the radar this episode, and I feel that was primarily because it was like, Shindo is our detective in this season, so we can't let Kogami show off too much. But the moment Kogami was in the background during the investigation scene with all of them at the table, I was like, Kogami's already figured this out. He's already done 40 chess. We might as well put it away. He's just going and visiting. He's visiting Akane, and it's amazing. I'm just, okay, yep. She's like, I was a cog in the machines. She's like, I realized they were sent by the man we encountered at Heaven's Leap, which she's like Azusawa. So he's like, but their hue recovered and now they live a normal life. And she's like, I'm prepared to accept the consequences of whatever happens. So yeah, meanwhile, we have this flashback scene with Shindo in his little sweater vest, looking the most adorable. I feel like his parents were older when he was born because he wears like a lot of clothes that older people would pick out, I feel like the sweater vests and stuff. And he's like, no matter how old it gets, maintenance can bring it back. With time and effort, a mind can clear. There's a lot of talk about hues clearing in this chapter, or in this episode, about hues clearing with effort. And that part's interesting to me because back in season 1, it's funny how this world has evolved. In season 1, it was like once you're hue clouded and you were a latent criminal and you were institutionalized, it was like a death sentence. You were like, nope, you're never getting out of there. You're going to stay in that prison forever. There's no hope for you, whatever. But over the course of the last 8 years in the show, it seems like, no, there are ways in which your hue can clear up. There are psychological treatments that will allow your hue to clear, kind of like Kunozuka's did, and let you reintegrate in society, and like Kay's wife and all of this. So it's interesting to see how the world building and how the Sybil system has kind of evolved to allow for that. But the dad be telling him like, this is how you can clear a mind and a hue and everything. He's like, or it can be intentionally broken. That little line there was a bit ominous, where I was like, oh. So the dad, even though he looks, he kind of looks like Shindo there. Shindo looks like a good cross between his mom and his dad. He says, well, we can use this power for good, or we can manipulate people and break them. And it's very clear in that moment that the dad probably does the latter. But Shindo is bound and determined to not manipulate. He's like, I'm just going to use my powers for good to be a detective, and I'm not going to manipulate others despite whatever my father did in the past. So then we have Kay and Akira show up, and we don't really get to see much of Akira. So Akira was in cahoots with him with whatever they were doing and the whole case or whatnot, and we don't really get to see Akira's face, but I'm sure he looks like Kay. And he's like, oh, Inspector Shindo. And yeah, he's like, Akira. Now, when he says Inspector Shindo, Atsushi worked for the Ministry of Welfare. He did not work for the Public Safety Bureau. So he was an inspector in the Bifrost system, right? Possibly. Now, Bifrost's whole thing that's interesting here is they seem to want to be able to circumvent civil system. That seems to be their whole trajectory, right? And it seems like Akira, as well as they were a part of it. And he's like, oh, Arata, you go play with Kay. And he's like, okay. And so they were just playing together. So the thing that's so crazy about this is, one, Shindo and Kay have been friends for since they were kids, childhood friends. That explains why their bond is so great, because from the beginning we've established that Shindo and Kay, their personalities and even some of their moral views are different, and they're not compatible. So it's kind of like, well, but why were you guys friends? Why do you work together? And it's one, because they've known each other so long, they have that bond, and two, because they're both trying to find the truth of what's happened. The problem is, when they find that truth out, how is it going to affect either one of them? Because Kay seems like he's in the mindset of, oh, if your dad was manipulating people and your dad manipulated and killed my brother and you could potentially do the same, do I want to be around you? And Shindo's like, and Shindo's like, but I'm not my dad. And this series has had a whole host of parents and their kids. Are your parents like your kids? Ganoza would like to talk to you all. I want Shindo and Ganoza to have a conversation after this. I want Shindo to have a conversation with Ganoza and them talk about their fathers and how it's good and bad to be similar and dissimilar from them. Because I think Ganoza would be a great role model for Shindo to talk to, because Ganoza is like Masayoka in a way, but very different from him. And I think that Shindo should have that conversation with Ganoza about that. But maybe the 3 movies will give us that. Maybe. I don't know. In any case, he fell asleep in his little sleeping bag onesie there at the office. And there's a note on the computer that says, I'm going home. And so I don't know who wrote that, if it was Kay or if somebody else wrote it. But Shindo's arm is still hurt. So I think that's important to note going into the next movie, that his arm is still hurt. And he's like, what am I? Well, he's asymptomatic. Something else that's interesting here is that we have the conversation between Mika and Kasai. Kasai does not tell Mika that she already knows about this criminally asymptomatic business and that she's been talking with Akane about it. There's still this 3-way, again, we talk about triangles, there's still this 3-way conversation where Mika is talking to Akane and they don't think Kasai knows. Kasai and Akane are talking and Mika doesn't know. And then Mika and Kasai are talking and Akane doesn't know. It's like damn Mean Girls up in here. They're just having a 3-way phone call, but they think one of the group doesn't know what's going on. It's insane. I also get like that there's a little bit of animosity with Kogami and Mika where he's just like, are we just working together because we have to professionally? Fine. So they establish the problem is Bifrost. And Mika makes the comment that it would have to predate Sybil system in order to function. She's like, well, it shows how much Mika believes in the Sybil system, where she's like, oh, well, we couldn't have, she's like, oh, well, Sybil system wouldn't be able to, Bifrost couldn't exist unless it did before Sybil system. And the Sybil system kind of says, are you sure about that? But it doesn't question her, just lets it kind of go, like, okay. Sure, you can think that. All right, fine. But then, yeah, she ends up saying that I'm going to investigate and report on it. And she's like, well, you're an ideal and capable citizen. I'm sure you'll do your job. I still can't get over the fact that Kasai, her and Akane are still acting behind the scenes like they're playing chess against one another. And Mika is I like Mika a lot more in this season. I really do. She's a lot funnier, and I appreciate her attitude a lot more, but she's still unaware that Kasai is having these talks with Akane, and it kind of blows my mind. And she's like, you're a capable and ideal citizen. And she's like, oh, well, I'm really quite dull. Again, Mika being a little bit self-loathing, I'm like, girl, you're not dull. And the Sybil system's like, oh, no, not recently. You're getting into some interesting waters there. I love the background of the place that they're at. It's really cool, like their little meeting room. It's interesting. So in any case, then Mika gets onto Akane, being like, you're going around wrecking everything. And Akane's like, here we go. She's like, I gotta deal with you still. She's like, I'm the one taking the fall for it. And Akane's like, well, you make it sound like I did it alone. I love that Akane's like, you make it sound like Kasai doesn't know what's going on. What are you doing? She's like, I'll look after our 2 new inspectors. She's like, because we're short-staffed and I don't want to lose them. I love that Akane's like, do you mean that you're going to care for them and you think they're nice people? And she's like, no, we're short-handed and we're short-staffed and we need them. I feel like Akane knows much more than she's letting on to Mika, but can you blame her? Also, it looks like there's more people hanging out during the cafeteria where they interview, so the thing of it is, I want to know what is going to end up happening with Kunozuka's interview. Like, is Azusawa taking it away? Did he take that info? This documentary on justice? Like, what? Why did Azusawa target her? What the frick is the deal? So, in any case, Mika talks about how she feels about justice. So we can kind of talk about here. As far as the justice conversation goes, right? Mika believes that human justice, she talked about this here, human justice has no value. And she believes that we need to let a system have control and work with it. So again, she is very much in belief of the Sybil system. She's like, nope, human system. It's like, is that wrong for a member of the Public Safety Bureau to say? And Kunazuka's like, well, what is justice to you then, if that's what you think? And she says, doubt not God, test not God. So that's what I want to do. Where she says, doubt, do not test the higher powers. Mika's very much in belief of an authoritative system. She's like, let them be in charge, and we just do exactly what they say, and as long as they have our best interests, we're fine. And so Mika lets her do the interview, and again, Mika's saying, anything for you, Yayoi. I'm like, ugh, could you tell me what you're really after? And then she's like, this is for Akane, isn't it? And I like that she's like, well, it's not that simple. So this all has something to do with it, but the question is, has Akane been able to access this? Because it has like Wi-Fi and a location on there. Has she been able to access and listen to this whole thing the whole time? Does she know Azusawa has been targeting and attacked Kunazuka? We don't know. We're not going to know until the next episode. Damn it. Meanwhile, she's like, do you think your superiors plan to put you together? And it's one of those situations where they're like, no, it just worked out this way. We just happen to be qualified. And he's like, well, Shindo does his best. And he's like, speak for yourself. Yeah. He's like, that was a compliment. Yeah, it's like the two of them are on edge the entire episode. And it's just like they're putting to the test. What I like about this scene of them getting debriefed with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where they're trying to figure out about Bifrost being this entity exploiting the Sybil system. What I like about it is that the whole time, Kogami is standing up away from the table. Because it's like you have Sugo and Ginoza, who were inspectors and were working for the Sybil system, didn't seem to have a problem working for the Sybil system, but then they were transferred over to work with Frederica. And Kogami, who's been like outside the country, he's seen the rest of the world, he's seen what it's like, he hates the Sybil system, he's just standing there as an outsider. And I kind of love that. I love that Kogami is not at the table with them. He's just Sherlock being a fly on the wall, right? So then they talk about the whole Bifrost setup, and he's like, the Foxes don't know what they're doing, and that's why their crime coefficients don't increase, because they don't realize they're doing something bad. And they're like, a person unknowingly making parts for their gun is going to have a different psychopath than the one who fires it. Now, I do think that's going to make Kay a prime target, because if Kay's, psychopath's crime coefficient increases, then they're going to be like, why? We know you're an inspector, but why is it increasing? And I think that he might be able to use the inspector title to like cover him, but I don't know. And they're like, with Azusawa, he's just really hard to track down. Something has gone wrong with the blind spot that they're hiding in, and that's why they're taking risks. They're going to target the governor again. And then they target her because they need her to be dead, right? So then they ask him how he feels about his cases, and Shindo says seeing people die is really tough. And Kay says, well, under the system, unfortunate cases exist. What's interesting to me is that Kay says that he likes working for the Sybil system because it's gave him a place to be at. But over the last several months, what we've seen with the case is that because Karina is working for the Sybil system, essentially, as the governor, her saying that the immigrants are now a problem is making Kay feel more insecure about the Sybil system that led him there. So my fear is that Azusawa and Bifrost is going to exploit that and be like, hey, you said you were working for Sybil system and that you believe Sybil system's justice, but here's what's happening with you and your wife. Do you really believe that, or do you want to try to change it? What's fascinating to me is it seemed like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were also trying to take the Sybil system down. During the Sinners in the System gig, it seemed like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was trying to take the Sybil system down. But now they've been really quiet and remote about everything, and they've not really said much. So I'm like, are we going to see the Sybil system be taken down from two different sides, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and from Bifrost, or what's happening? We didn't. That's my one thing about this season that I wish we had more of, was knowing where did that dialogue and rhetoric from the Sinners in the System films. It kind of just gets left out in this season, and we don't really explore it. So, like, are we going to go back to it in the next 3 movies and Providence? Or that's going to be something to kind of question and see if we do end up getting that. He's like, there are always criminals whose cases are involved. And Shindo's kind of like, well, what do you mean? He's like, people who live to harm others. And he's like, well, there can't be many. I like that in this moment, Shindo and Kei, they kind of show just how different their worldviews are. Shindo has a very optimistic view of the world, and he's very, like, glass half full. He's like, well, yeah, there's some rotten apples, but they're you know, the minority. They're not the rule, you know? Whereas Kei is like, no, there are horrible people in the world, and they always want to hurt people. And it's like, ugh. I still can't believe that he had blonde hair and that he's dyed it black. Again, I think he dyed it black so that he could fit in better in Japan, and he wouldn't be as much of a target. And that's really sad, right? But seeing both of their worldviews and how they're different here is really important, I feel. And I feel like Akane is going to be using this information gathered on Kei to kind of out him as an inspector later on. So they find out that there are heavily armed criminals that are separate from Bifrost. And they establish that they used to be peacebreakers, and now they call themselves pathfinders. So there are some people that are targeting pathfinders, that are targeting Bifrost's congressmen. And I thought they were connected to Azusawa. I feel like Azusawa's got his hand in the pot everywhere. I feel like they were all connected to him. We don't know exactly about Peacemakers, if they were from the Sinners in the System movie, maybe. But they have, like, a keyhole emblem, so... And she's like, look up these classified materials later. I hope we get to find out what the level 3 classified materials are in the upcoming movies. I want to know what that information is. Please and thank you. A special force involved in black market overseas and looting. That feels like Sinners in the System stuff. Meanwhile, we go back to the apartment with the ramp where Shindo lived, which is interesting. And then we see his mom and his dad, who he looks like both of them. And so then he talks about, it's not why I became an inspector or anything, though. And so he has the interview. He's like, why do you always hide your true feelings? And again, with Shindo, I feel like she's like, why do you hide your true feelings? And he's like, well, because I feel like him and Ganoza have so much in common, because he's like, I'm dealing with how my father is viewed by others, how that opinion reflects on me, my own views, and how they differ from my dad's. Like, I want Shindo and Ganoza to talk. And so they say there's a fox in the system. And Kei defends her, saying she fell into a trap. It wasn't her fault. But I'm like, Kei can't defend himself from this move. He made the choice to join the Fox, to join the inspectors. He made the decision. Oh, that betrayal. Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much. And then he's like, I trusted her. The responsibility is mine. And Shindo keeps telling him, you're taking too much on yourself. And he keeps on doing it. He doesn't listen. So yeah, so they go to basically break up. And they're like, that was the extent of her involvement with the Foxes. And Timma's like, you know, speak up sooner next time. Don't make yourself... Which is funny that he says that, because Kei ain't going to speak up about any of this. So they decide to lay a trap for Azusawa to meet him at a certain place. And then Kisaragi's going to be the bait. And Kei is absolutely against that, because, again, Kei is, like, thinking that this won't... It's like, you're going to make her confront him in person. And I'm like... Honestly, I can see where Kei is coming from, because the idea of them going in person is a really risky move. Because, yeah, if it doesn't work out, you know, it could backfire severely. And Kisaragi's not a great actress. So if she ends up making one false move, she could be dead. So I get why Kei would be against that. But Shindo's like, what other choice do we have? Like, this is our way to kind of weed him out. And he's like, so that's your plan. Is it air? And when Kay said, is your plan airtight? He's basically saying, is it without problems? Is there a chance that she could get hurt? And it's all going back to the idea of Shindo and his airtight plan getting Maiko involved. And Shindo's like, well, what do you want me to do? What else can we do? It's just, oh, it's so tense. And Mika's like, yeah, no, we're going to have her contact Azusawa. Take no dangerous action, then you're all dismissed. But yeah, just the tension. Oh. And then they go their separate ways and they go opposite directions. And Shion's like, are they fighting? And Mika's like, it's about the wife. Yeah. Meanwhile, I love Hinakawa's trying to work out. It's so cute. But the part where he gives Kisaragi the file and he's like, yeah. He's like, I thought you might be suspicious going back to episode 1. So he's like, so I kept up on you, but you can destroy it now. He's like, I know you're good. And when he pats her shoulder, it's like such a senpai moment. Oh, our boy Hinakawa, he's grown up so much. It's so sweet. Like that whole part there, it was so adorable. I loved it. So then we have the interview with Kay where he's like, I'm glad when Sybil chose me, I was able to use my skills for peace and to feel that I was a good person. Oh man, I feel tragic back. I feel just tragic hero taking the fall vibes from Kay, where he thinks he's doing good and he's using his powers for justice, but it all gets corrupted. Like I have bad feelings about all of this. Horrifically bad feelings. I don't like where this is headed for his character. And he's like, justice has to be upheld, and that's why I live without self-deception. Oh. Yep. He has to uphold it. He very much... Kay gives me Harvey Dent vibes of, like, the White Knight, and I'm like, I don't want him to become Two-Face. And I feel like he's becoming Two-Face, and I'm like, oh, no. And then that whole scene at the hospital is awful, because he tries to get his wife out and he says no. And then Obata and the others have like manipulated the news to where now he's being blamed for the actions against the governor. And it's like, what do you do? And so, and of course, if Kay finds out that Azusawa is responsible for all that, and he knows Azusawa is responsible for his wife, then there's a very good chance that Kay is going to go along with Shizuka to become a congressman and take out Azusawa because he feels like he's, involved and it's partially his responsibility. I don't like where this is headed. No, ma'am. No. Also, I think Obata is using a hologram to, like, change her appearance, which is cool. But she very much gives me, if, like, Azusawa is, like, the low-rent version of Light Yagami, then she's giving me, just cyber goth Misa, and I'm all about it. I'm kind of all about it. Obata's character is great. So anyway, he's reading this book. Azusawa and Mikishima are the ship we never got that we deserve, right? I know everybody wants to ship Kogami and Mikishima. I feel you. I get you. I see you. I see the ship. But, like, I want to take Kogami out of that ship, put him over with Akane, and I want to take Azusawa and put him in Mikishima's ship. He was eating damn Madeleines. They like the same bland desserts. They're made for one another, right? They both like reading obscure books. Although, here's the thing. I feel like Azusawa wants to be like Mikishima, but he's exactly kind of what Mikishima said he was. Mikishima was like, I'm just a common guy who's out to change the justice system. I'm just eating my bland little Madeleines. I've got my little book club. I'm just this guy that's just a random commoner that just has a lot of ambition and drive, and I'm out to change the world. That's what he said. But we all know Mikishima's a damn diva and was way smarter than he let on and had a vendetta and was way more emotional than he let on. Like, we know all these things, right? Azusawa is like the guy Mikishima was talking about. He's kind of just reading this book, and the way he describes it, I don't know if Mikishima would approve, but he's questioning what the metaphors are and all of this. And he's breaking it down so Mikishima be like, okay. And then he's having the damn Madeleines. And I'm like, you are the common guy he was talking about. But Another series I've watched has said the phrase, there's nothing more dangerous than an average man with a mission. And that is literally Azusawa. So he talks about the story and breaks it down. And he's like, there's a nutcracker who is a soldier who battles evil mice. And he needs to crack the world's hardest nut, the Krakatook. And the way he describes it, he's like, what do you think the Krakatook is a metaphor for? And she's like, I don't know, I'm just drinking my Coca-Cola. And she's like, your balls! When she said your balls, I was like, damn, girl, I freaking love you. You and Asasawa have the best relationship. And he's like, you're the best, Obata. And she's like, I hate you so much. He's like, I love you, seriously. And she's like, eat shit and die. Basically. He says, the Public Safety Bureau is my Krakatook. And I want to crack Shindo. He's like, he's Atsushi's son. I've got to crack him before he becomes like his father. So Azusawa is terrified of Shindo because he thinks he might be as strong as his dad if he figures things out, which he could. Will he use his powers for good or not? That's the question. And Kei even seems a bit scared for Shindo. So that's good to note. So anyway, The Nutcracker and the Mouse King was written in 1816 by E.T.A. Hoffmann, basically a German author. And it basically talks about all that he goes off of. The idea, I mean, you could read the description of the story. Essentially, there's been a ton of adaptations from it. But it was published in Berlin as part of a bunch of children's stories. And then it was turned into the ballet The Nutcracker, which I think, if you know anything, there's been like so many adaptations of The Nutcracker. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, so I feel like it's not quite classy enough or abstract enough for Mikishima. He'd be like, what a basic bitch. But I kind of want to ship them together. I feel like Azusawa is like so basic. He's trying so hard, but he's so dangerous that Mikishima would be like, okay, I keep you around. The scene with Karina, though, was so frustrating right after it because Kei's already on edge. Kei is already on edge as it is. And then the fact that he's thrown off of detail because she doesn't want any immigrants involved. I'm like, Shindo, I know you want to flirt with her and you want to be shipped with her. She makes some questionable choices, like letting her assistant go because she's an immigrant, just like that. And she's like, well, I'm doing this to like make the world a better place. And I'm like, but at what cost? And is that right? And I want Shindo to question her a little more. I feel like Shindo gives her the benefit of the doubt a lot because he likes her and because he sees a little bit of himself with her. But when they were in the car ride together, I almost wanted him to defend Kei a little bit more. And he tries to get her to let his wife go. But he just kind of like, my one issue with Shindo and Karina is I feel like he kind of lets his flirtiness and his love for her kind of get in the way because he doesn't ever like try to challenge her a little bit more than I think he could or that he did at the beginning of the series. And I think that if Kei saw that car ride, he'd probably maybe respect that Shindo was trying, but also be like, you could have pushed more. But it sucks. I feel so bad for Kei. And then I feel like this incident only makes it like, because he blames Shindo for being on her side, and Shindo's like, we got a job to do, and we can't do our job if we're not like protecting her, and we can't protect her if she won't let us near her, so try to figure this out. And so I feel like the whole beef with Shindo about Karina, the whole thing with his wife, the whole thing where he's being targeted, it all adds up to him making this horrible decision to be an inspector. Ugh. And he's like, it's fine. Now I can focus on the hunt. It's okay that I'm not on that case. Oh, I hate it. And them going separate ways. Like, I like that Temma gets placed with Kei because Temma and Kei have kind of formed this relationship and this bond. And so have Kisaragi. And then Eri and Hinakawa have the best relationship with Shindo. But I hate how it seems like the division is getting slowly split in half. I don't like that at all. I don't like the idea that we're dividing the division in half right now. Instead of being united like we were at the beginning, we're starting to get divided, and I don't like that. I don't like where that's headed. I don't like what that could mean. Then Temma says, Temma's view of justice, like, I feel like with Kei, it's very much like a white knight. where he's like, we need justice. He doesn't exactly specify whose justice. He just says there needs to be justice for the people. So it's a bit different than Mika. But then with Timma, he talks about how humans are flawed and that justice can be a very flitting word. Like he's like justice, people say that and it's kind of cringy sometimes, but he's like, if people are actually serious about justice, he's like, then I respect them. So I feel like that's why Timma respects Kay, because he's like, Kay understands justice and he respects it, so I kind of respect him for it. It's an embarrassing word to say, but those who use it in earnest really shine. And that kind of is why him and Kay get along so well. So then there's the whole like elevator conversation with Shindo, and he's like, and in that elevator conversation, he's like, how much can mental tracing control someone? And he's like, well, it's more effective than some counseling. It's called psychic driving. And he's like, well, what about your father? And Shindo's kind of like, you're bringing my dad up? Like, are you suggesting I'm being like him? And then that's when Kay says, he's like, Shindo's like, I don't know what you're thinking. He's like, have you ever driven me or Maiko? And Shindo's like, no, why would you say that? He's like, I have not, and I would never. And then he says, mentalist, heal thyself. I hate that moment, because I'm like, why are you pushing all these doubts on Shindo? Shindo is not doubting you. Shindo gets a lot of brunt with this, and it's, ugh. Then we get this really pretty scene with Eerie being interviewed. And poor Eerie, like, the dude tries to basically almost hitting on Kunozuka, being like, hey, you want to have a political discussion? You want to do this? I'm like, dude, she's practically married. What are you doing? He's like, the people wanted the governor, nothing more, nothing less. He's like, the old you would have recorded a bunch of diss tracks. I like that Eerie kind of liked Kunozuka and knows about her like past as a rock star. And then he's like, justice, a word that losers would shout a lot. My dad died believing in that word. So we get like a little bit of insight into maybe why Eerie is so politically minded, because his father was. And that's like maybe the one part of his dad he takes with him. Like, I love that Eerie starts out by saying something very like just kind of abrasive and brash, but what it does is it hides like a little bit of the softness under the surface. It's like, oh, I love that scene so much. That scene's great. So then we have the car conversation with Shindo and Karina, and he's like, I'm really busy. And you could tell Shindo's really worried. He's like, I got a lot on my mind. My best friend is against me right now. He's mad at me. I'm just trying to make the right decision. And she talks about party politics and not being able to keep in at her side because of it. She's like, politics is the one way to reduce violence and minimize conflict. And what does she say there? She says, that's why I'm a politician. I'll make this country one where no one can complain, even if or your partner were at my side. I appreciate her trying to do something for the good, but it's like, there's the idea of doing good. Again, we go back up here to the Sybil system. There is the outcome, but then there's also the method, right? And that's a big metaphor for this whole episode, is the outcome for the method. Like, she's saying, I need to do these things so that we can make the world a better place. I have to get rid of my partner, and I have to keep your partner away. And it seems like I'm against immigrants, but that's going to minimize the conflict. Then you have the Sybil system that's like, we got to kill people who have high crime coefficients, but it's to make the world a more peaceful place, And then we have Kay being like, I'm joining these inspectors, but it's going to make my wife safe, and it's going to help me out. And in the long run, it's going to be a better thing. And it's like all these people and all these systems have outcomes that seem great, but then it's the methods by which they get those outcomes that are like, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. And it just guts you. It just guts your heart. Throw a knife in it, right? And Shindo, he's like, well, then I have a request. And he's like, I want you to try to get his wife freed. And she's like, oh, well, I'll do what I can, which is basically her saying she's not going to be able to do it, right? So then the Metropolitan Police Bureau servers. Then the enemy will see how convenient Kisaragi is. You're like, will they notice? And he's like, we're going to trust the enemy's competence and go with it. So then we have Kisaragi. I like the idea that she's swimming. She seems like a free stroke swimmer. And here's the thing. They're setting it up to where Kisaragi and Temma are going to be on Kay's side. Because Temma talks about how the person whose sense of justice he respects is essentially Kay. She talks about owing everything to Kay and his wife. Meanwhile, you have Hinakawa, who's going to go with Shindo because he's like Akane. And Eri, who seems like he is, he's been with Shindo this entire season. So they're setting up the division to split. And I don't like it. I don't like where this is headed, honestly. He's worthy of respect. He's strong-willed. And she talks about not being a strong person at all. She's like, I'm really weak. And she's like, I realized recently that that's what justice means for us, is protecting the people we care about. So yeah, for Kisaragi, it's protecting others. Both of these things tying to Kay. Mika's does not really tie to any of them. She's like all with the Sybil system, But then she gets the instructions. It should have been foreshadowing that something bad was going to happen whenever we got this thing with Shion. And she was talking about, like, oh, you'll know how to edit it. And she's like, my crime coefficient has been dropping lately, too. And then she's like, I thought I would spend my whole life here. And so she talks about, like, lizards adapting in this situation, but because they adapted to the environment they were in, they could never go back to where they were. Meaning, she's like, I thought that my crime coefficient was going to eventually I was going to get used to being a latent criminal and be here my whole life. And Kunozuka's like, you're not a lizard. You're going to get out of this. I don't know. If Kunozuka's dead and Shion, like, will her crime coefficient go down because of that? What's going to happen? I may have to watch the next episode before I go on my trip. I don't know. I didn't have it in the schedule to do that, but I don't know. I'm going to have to probably wait a week, and that's going to suck so much. But yes. A species of lizard was chased in the trees by an invasive species, and we have that conversation. So then there's the whole thing with Shinigane and our dear Azusawa, who basically talks about he doesn't remember much from his childhood. His trauma came from being in the Ministry of Welfare, where he was, like, crushed, as he says, by Atsushi. So he has passed with Atsushi, and that's what basically caused him to, like, go towards revenge and start down his dark path. Maybe one day we'll find out what happened. I don't know. They don't seem fit to tell us. But he's like, and Shinigami seems to want to make him a congressman. He's like, but there's also Shindo's son. And he's like, Shindo is criminally asymptomatic. He was born immune to Sybil's judgment, a being equal to Bifrost. So the people that are asymptomatic are essentially like Bifrost that are above or immune to Sybil's judgment. So they're like, he's a problem because he's not working for us. And if Sybil's system decides to make him work for them, then he's a problem. He can act on his own. And so, like, what does it mean to be criminally asymptomatic? And he's like, oh, well, you'll find out when you become a congressman. So that's the thing. Is it like Azusawa and Kay, are they both going to want to try to find out the truth? And the only way to find out the truth is to become a congressman, to become at the top of the system? That's the problem. I have a fear that Kay is going to get to that spot and not be able to turn back. And then he's going to be forced to fight against Shindo. And Shindo's like, one of us is going to have to die. Like, why? Damn it. It's terrifying. I do like the paparazzi drones being like all these little Beyblade discs. I think that's hilarious. I really like that. And that Shindo's like, okay, we're going to find Obata by tracking all of them. Right? So then Shindo says that Azusawa makes him sick. The fact that he's disinterested in humans and treats it all as a game. Again, I don't think Shindo... I said earlier if Shindo and Mikishima would get along. I don't think that they would. Maybe they would. I don't know. Mikishima... I'd be interested to see Mikishima talk to Shindo and Azusawa. I think Azusawa would think that him and Mikishima would get along swimmingly. But I don't know. The fact that Shindo's so resilient, he's more like Akane, though. And Akane and Mikishima don't really get along, so what can we do? But I like Shindo establishing that basically, you know, justice is for the people and that he doesn't like games. He's like, I'm solving crimes, but he's like, I'm not here to play games, and people aren't chess pieces. He's like, I don't like that at all. So then we have Hinakawa, who's like, this is an investigation, right? You're giving this to Akane, right? And I love how he says that everything he learned was from Tsunemori. I love how much faith he has in her. And that he just loves her so much. Aww. So then they go in, and Kei's like, I'm going in. And they're like, well, this used to be Inamiya's headquarters. What are you doing? And he's like, no, I'll contract you whenever we're done. But Shirogane, not Shinogane. So then Azusawa, the whole thing with Azusawa is he's like, they're weighing him and me, they're weighing us against each other to get you. And he's like, I want to help you. But I'm like, okay. And he's like, you're like me. And he's like, well, that's a misunderstanding. And then he says, why do you want to be a congressman? And he says, well, as long as people live, they are cogs in society's machine, and I want to be on top. And Shizuka's like, well, he's like, I'm glad you answered honestly. He's like, in a sense, we don't place values on people's humanity. I agree with that. So Shizuka doesn't care about people at all. He's like, whatever, I don't care about them. He's like, but I don't like the idea of being cogs in a machine, and I don't agree with you on that. I don't think of people as cogs, and I despise games. So interestingly enough, Shizuka is like Azusawa in that he doesn't like humanity, which, based on his father and what we've seen of him, can't imagine why. He also has a Borzoi. He has a dog. He doesn't need people. But he is not like Azusawa. He's more like Shindo in the fact that he doesn't believe in games or in using people. Which is interesting because he kind of manipulates Kei. He's like, but you're so good at them. And he's like, preferences have nothing to do with that. He's like, I'm just playing the game because I have to. And so then Azusawa's like, I'm going to show you proof that you need me. So the question is, like, it seems like this is the matchup, but Azusawa says that he's working with Kei and they want to get rid of Shinogane. So is it going to be like a situation where he wants to be the congressman alongside Shizuka and Kei? Like, what? Where we have an immigrant, a commoner, and this wealthy man as the Bifrost leaders? I don't know. I'm so curious where this is going. Because then he sends in the two assassins saying, yep, it's time. And then that's when Ganoza and them show up to fight Vixen and the other guy. The Vixen lady puts up a damn good fight. And so Miyano Mamoru's character says, promise you won't mention anybody to me. And he's like, I'll save your wife. It says that there's an hour on there. So an hour till what? I guess until Bifrost requires them to go back. So I guess it means until they go back, they have an hour to waste. And so then he gives them, it's like a 3 candelabra. I guess the 3 congressmen are the candelabra. Oh my God. And then he's like, if you register with your biometrics. The point of the story is, kids, don't use biometrics. Don't use fingerprint activation. Don't do anything that's going to lock you into a contract. Please and thank you. Don't do it. He says, if you want to learn the truth from me, then register your biometrics with the device. Uh-huh. And then you'll get your wife back. Oh my God. But Kogumi's on to him. Kogumi's like, you selling your soul over there? You up there selling your soul? You gonna do that? You not? Because it's like Kei could turn him in. In that moment, Kei could have turned him in. We could have had all this taken care of. But nope. I'm just like... I'm like, Kei, what are we doing? Because Kogumi saw, he's like, choose to cooperate with me or abandon me. And he chose to cooperate with him. And Kogumi's like, son of a bitch, I smell a traitor from a mile away. Oh my God. Yeah, something's bothering me. Kogumi's senses are correct. So they managed to find out Ichinumon. He manages to find out the signature, and they track down Obata, who was doing her best goth lumberjack fantasy. I love it. She's like, fine, I'll go. Are you happy? And then he says, are you a congressman? He's like, I'm someone who can give you what you currently most desire. Make up your mind and choose. And of course we get it in the rain, right? Where he comes back in. If I had been Kogami, I would have searched his pockets and found that little activation thing and would have shut this shit down. If he had had the authorization to do so, I would have done it. You know Kogami's going to be like, bitch, are you for real? Whenever we find all this out. And maybe it'll all work out and Kay's decisions will lead them to take Bifrost down through Shizuka. But I'm like, Shizuka preys on him. He's much more of a manipulator than he lets on. So frustrated. I'm so frustrated. He's like, you can cover up a lie for only so long. And then, yep. So then they end up going there. And I'm trying to think, when they show up there, he goes to wherever Bifrost is. We still don't get any answers with that. And it's just Shirogane and him left. And then we cut to Mika being mad, being like, well, what are we going to do? And Shindo's like, can I just question her? So she's like, get out, both of you. I'm like, girl, you should probably look into what's going on with both of them because it may have some big thing to do with everything. I don't know. I would check into it if I were you. He's like, I'm an inspector and a mentalist. I can manipulate you, but I won't. She's like, your dad would have. I was like, damn! I'm like, everybody's just out rubbing in Shindo's face about how bad his dad was. And then he ends up making the decision. And it said the 13th inspector registered. Oh, my heart breaks. It broke. And it said mail from, your contract is signed. Your wife will be discharged tomorrow and I'll be in touch. I'm like, Kay, you've signed your soul away. Oh my God. But he got his wife back. She's like, did you save me? He's like, no, this is only natural. I'm like, Kay, damn it. And it says that surgery's a success and she'll be able to see once she settles down. I don't know. I feel like something bad's going to happen with her and it's going to be like the price he pays for signing the contract. It's going to be like a monkey's paw, but I hate it. I hate it so much. I'm like, I hope things work out for her and all of them, but... So then Shirogane is like, well, you've made a series of blunders first. Because he's like, no, they were all calculated opening moves. Because he's like, well, was adding a new inspector part of your plan as well? And at that, I was like, wait, what? He seems surprised. He's like, Shizuka enlisted him as your rival. And he's like, well, now. And they have the damn mandolins. He's like, don't falter in the end game. And he's like, oh, don't worry. He's like, this is where the real game begins. I hate it. I'm like, because now it's going to be like Kay versus Shindo, because he can't let Shindo know what's going on, and he's going to let any of them know that he's in the middle of all this with Bifrost, or is he going to try to keep it a secret so he can advance up to find out more information? Damn it. Damn it! But then, yeah, May gets out, and she's like, yeah, I'm sorry for getting too angry. And he's like, it's because I failed to protect you. And she's like, he's like, neither of you are prepared. Because she questions there, she's like, are you really just afraid that you all are going to lose me? She's like, you guys, are you prepared to be able to deal with the fact that I could die? She's like, my fate's in my hands. She's like, don't worry about me. She's like, neither of you are prepared. And he's like, well, you're strong, Mai. She's like, I'm not prepared to see this world either. I like that she's like, look, she's like, I know we're all scared of what could happen, but the three of us need to work together. And Mai, you're like the glue holding these three together right now. She's like, I'll be able to see it one day. But it's not the world itself that scares us. It's losing our bonds. And I'm like, she says that as I'm like, the decisions that Kay has made is possibly going to lead them to lose their bonds. And I'm like, we had this great image of them like holding hands and fist bumping and stuff 2 episodes ago, and now it's all getting torn apart. Oh my God. Oh my God. He's like, yeah, I think you're right. And she's like, well, Kay hit you, didn't he? So you can hit him back, okay? He's like, good idea. I have a feeling he's going to be hitting him back at some point. I think at some point he's going to hit him back. And he's like, I'm going to apologize to Kay. Oh, damn it. And that's when Karina shows up. And she gives him the cologne, which is an interesting gift. I feel like it's a surveillance device or something. Or it's for tracking or something. Uh-huh. I feel like there's some other alternative use for it, whether it's nefarious or not, because otherwise, giving somebody the gift of perfume, unless they asked for it, usually is not a complimentary thing. So we'll see where that ends up going. Yeah. She's like, well, I should be the one thanking you. I feel like this all, we talk about bonds, I'm like, I'm so worried, because I have a feeling that Kay, I have a feeling Kay's going to feel guilty because if Shindo's trying to be nice to him and repair their bonds, I feel like Kay's going to feel guilty for betraying them and joining the inspectors. And it was a moment of weakness, but he can't do anything about it now. He's stuck there. And now Azusawa is going to be after him. It's just going to all be a mess. I wanted him so badly to take that thing to the others. I wanted it so badly, but he didn't do it. At least we have Kogami and Akane together where he goes to visit her. I'm like, this show, for all that it gives us, it is such a damn tease. You've had them like sleeping together in the same tent before. Now they have a chance to be together and he's just standing outside her door. Kasai could go in there. Why couldn't anybody else? She's like, I've always been physically tough. And he's like, oh, I know. He's like, everyone's the same as ever. She's like, okay. He's like, your conviction was right. You'll be able to say so proudly one day. Oh. And she's like, well, tell me about yourself sometime, too. And he's like, sure, I've got stories for my long trip. Oh, like the two of them smiling at one another. I'm like, just let her in. Let him in. Let him in. Just let him in so you guys can have some alone time together. Please and thank you. But yeah, so then the car is going down the road. Kunazuka's car. As soon as we saw it, and then she's like, the current investigations, the last case I was involved in, are connected. Oh my god, I'm sure of it. And then we see Shindo, he's like, I don't know what justice means to me personally. But I can't control the truth. The control of justice. Damn, oh my god. And her going down. Okay, so at that moment, she got to the construction zone. And there was like a footage, right? And somebody activated the crane. From there. Oh my god. Oh. He says, Dad, I'm not going to run away from the truth so that I won't go wrong. Isn't that right, Kay? So Shindo basically saying in that moment, Shindo being like, I can't control the truth. He's like, the truth of the world, you cannot control. The only thing you can do is confront it and not run away. So maybe Shindo will be okay with Kay in all of this since he didn't technically run away. He instead like chose to embrace it, but I don't know. They're separate. This is all like, it feels like this felt like the end of the second act. It feels like the end of the second act is when everything seems at its worst. Like, Kunazuka seems like she's dead. Shindo and Kay are split apart, and they're having trouble with their relationship with one another. Kay's made some bad decisions that could lead to some very bad consequences. Shindo is trying to overcome, like, the vision everybody has of him and his dad. This felt like the end of a second act. It did not feel like a season finale. It felt like this felt like the rule of 8. It felt like the end of Act 2. Now we're starting the final act, is what it felt like. So yeah. That's all. That's all. No big deal. No big deal. So my questions going into we know we have 3 movies that are 45 minutes long and then the final film. That's all I want to know. We're going to tackle them one by one. It probably won't be till I get back from my vacation, so I'll be recharged and ready to dive into this. Don't you worry. It'll be a week for you and it'll be a week for me. It'll feel like it for sure. But in any case, my thing is going into this. My questions are, is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like, what do they have planned for the civil system? Are they needing to take down Bifrost first before attacking the civil system directly, if they're even going to do that? Are they going to end up becoming part of Bifrost or acting adjacent to it? Kay and Shindo and their whole relationship, what's going to be tested with that? Oh my God. Like last episode, 2 episodes ago, it felt like they were all working together, and now it's just kind of falling apart. So, God, I am so nervous for Kay. I can't even describe to y'all. Like, Kay is such a great character, but we've seen how weak he can be, even though he acts really strong. And I'm like, and all these people that believe in him, I'm seeing these factions forming. I don't like that. I'm just like, ugh. I thought after episode 6 that was the most anxiety-ridden I was going to be, but I was wrong. I was very wrong. So yeah, I'm gonna wait until I hear your comments about at least episode 7, because I think by the time I get back to record, I don't know. I will either be looking at the comments for episode 7 or episode 8 before I record the first movie. It might be just episode 7's, but still. Oh my God, y'all. I'm just mind blown. Mind blown, and now I'm super psyched and super nervous about what's to come. But I'm ready to hear your comments down below. So I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I'm going to go on vacation. When I come back, I'm going to be ready to start the Inspector episodes of Psycho-Pass. So until then, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care. And I'll be back real soon with more Psycho-Pass. Bye.